Hello and welcome to a very special episode and series of Man Enough called No More Silence. We're doing a special 4-part series with our partners Healthline, where we're breaking the silence about why men are less likely to talk about and seek care for mental and physical health issues and what we, the collective we, can do about it. And we have a very special guest with us for all 4 of these episodes. Yolo! Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. So my name is Yolo Akili Robinson. I'm the executive director and founder of BEAM, the Black Emotional and Mental Health Collective. BEAM is a national training, movement building, and grant-making institution dedicated to the healing, wellness, and liberation of Black and marginalized communities. And I'm a longtime healing justice and wellness worker in community health for about 16 years now. And I'm excited to be here.
So excited to have you.
Me too.
Yolo, I want fact checkers on this, said he was turning 40. And I barely...
No.
I know.
Are you serious?
I will be 40 next week.
Oh, man.
We're getting
Happy
that
birthday,
fact
Kevin.
check.
I'm gone.
We're getting that fact
I'm going
check.
to see you guys later.
I know. Just
I'm
immaculate.
keeping all of my 40 years. I'm grateful for every year.
What are we doing today? Why are we here for this special series?
I think that we got to address the elephant in the room,
Which is
why the hell we men don't take care of ourselves. Why don't we go to doctors? Why are we ashamed or embarrassed when something is wrong with us? Why do we lie to doctors? There's a whole lot of stuff around this, and it's a lot to unpack. What do you think, Liz?
I have so many thoughts, and we have an incredible expert at our table. So I'd love to start with, even just this idea in general in our society, and women definitely do it too, but I think if we see it through the prism of masculinity, we really separate physical and mental health. Like, we see them as completely different things. Why do you think that we do that, and why is it so important that we maybe do that a little less?
Well, first, I think there's a history of how we got to this point of seeing the physical body disparate from the spiritual or the emotional or the mental, right? I mean, this is the whole history of Western psychology and mental health we have to look to. There's a reason why we currently have so many neurobiologists and so many scientists who are telling us that actually your brain is not just here, your brain is all throughout your body. Or who are telling us that so many depressive symptoms can be mimicked when somebody has not eaten over a course of a couple of days, particularly with children, right? A lot of children being diagnosed with a variety of different conditions that are actually emblematic of other things, so some of them being physical nourishment, right? And so all of these things that we're kind of coming into awareness right now are showing us that things are not separate the way we would like them to be. There is the physical and emotional not separate. One thing I talk about, I have a background as a yoga teacher, and I really feel like it's important to talk about somaticization, right? So somaticization, for people who are not aware, is the ways in which our body we store emotions and feelings in our bodies, right? And so you think about all these instances where we have, particularly in my family and in Black communities and all communities, you have a relative or someone or even yourself, you have this pain in your shoulder and you go to your doctor and the doctor's like, there's nothing wrong with your shoulder, right? But then digging deeper under it emotionally, you find that this is connected to an emotional experience I had with a sibling or maybe I lost a loved one and somehow that was connected to my shoulder. So now I'm storing that emotional memory in my shoulder. There's a really great book called The Body Keeps the Score, which really talks about this. And so we have to really start thinking, how are they connected? What are the role they are playing with each other? What is the role that masculinity as a concept, as ideas, play on how I show up in my body or I don't show up in my body or how I don't show up for my body? There's so many dimensions, but I think the important piece to kind of answer your question briefly is that we have been taught through the early kind of history of Western psychology and wellness that everything is separate. And now we're coming back to a point of realizing everything's interconnected, which many indigenous and folks have been telling us quite since forever.
Yes, yeah.
Wow.
And so much of masculinity even can be a health risk, right? Having a higher score on this more traditional version of masculinity can lead to more risky behaviors, going to the doctor less, wearing less sunscreen, all the things we kind of know. But some of the most interesting data to me in this area is showing that men who make less than their female partners. So we're talking about obviously heterosexual men who are in partnerships with women. Those women, if they make more than them, men who are in those partnerships have higher levels of hypertension, higher diabetes, higher risk of a heart attack. And it's separate from, again, I'm not a scientist, but the people who've done this research have separated from all the other behaviors that might be influencing that it really is just because of the stress of not meeting that ideal of masculinity. So do you find that in your work with young men?
Oh, absolutely. I often credit my real education around men and masculinity came at an organization I worked at called Men Stopping Violence. And for folks who are not familiar, Men Stopping Violence, based in Atlanta, Georgia, is an organization that's dedicated to ending male violence against women by organizing and working with men. But it was 6 months of men coming through this process of beginning to really examine how they had internalized ideas about masculinity and how those ideas have shown up in their behavior and in their choices, impacting not only themselves and their physical selves, but also their families and their communities, often with detrimental and harmful impact, right? And so we can see a direct correlation. If I am taught my whole life from birth, as many men, and not just men, I want to be clear, as a non-binary person, I've lived in this body all my life. I'm read and receive male privilege every single moment of every day. So these things are still very deeply embedded in what I have to learn as well, and that's different for different non-binary people who may present differently or be read differently, right? But when you receive the messaging from very early on to emotionally disconnect, to emotionally suppress, and you receive that message early, I talk about my godson Dante, about how when he was learning how to walk, and I remember his barbecue, and he fell, he was trying, he's doing that little thing little kids do, the legs, right leg before the front leg, just trying to figure it out. And I'm a good distance away from him. I'm trying to egg him on. And then he falls down, and it's kind of hard before I can get to him. And so I pick him up, he's crying, snot nose, crying, not hurt, but crying. And I'm just comforting him. And in that moment, his father comes out and says, put him down. He needs to learn how to be a man. He's going to be a punk if you keep doing that to him. And I think I use that as an example to talk about how it starts so early. I'm Dante, he can't even pee in the toilet yet. He ain't you know what I mean? He can't. But you want him to somehow figure out how to be a man. You're in that indoctrination of shut down your emotions, shut down that part of yourself starts so early and continues throughout the course of our lives. So of course, when we're 40 or 50. What? Do you want me to talk about my feelings? You want me to go to a doctor and experience something vulnerable? If I haven't received a message that has taught me to not to do something counter to that, I'm going to internalize that and keep that going. And so I think we have to look at how early it starts, how the schools, how the education system, the media all reinforces this as natural in the way things are, as opposed to choices that we all make every day as a part of a system to reinforce this in men and masculine folks, and that we can also make different choices about how we engage that. There's all those dimensions.
So beautifully said.
As you were talking and you were describing your godson, it reminds me of the Bell Hooks quote where she talks about the first act of violence that men are tasked to commit in the patriarchy isn't violence against women, it's violence against themselves.
Absolutely.
And that act of soul murder where we sever ourselves from our hearts. And in some of my work, what I'm finding kind of goes back to this work that was done in the 80s, where they actually measured the chemical makeup of tears in children. And they found that tears contain stress hormone. And when that stress hormone is not released, there's a buildup in the body.
Absolutely.
So our bodies are naturally wired to cleanse themselves, to heal themselves. And we don't think about tears actually being healing. It's our body healing the trauma. Because what happens when we're 1, 2, 3, 4 years old, when we don't have the context, everything is traumatic, right? Just the simple act of your godson falling is trauma to that boy because he doesn't have the context to understand he's learning something. And so then when he falls, his body says, I need to cry. So he's releasing hormones. He's releasing these stress hormones that build up that eventually will cause all of the various things that you talk about, right? Heart disease, cancers, you name it. It's one of the reasons why men die younger than women. So I'm just wondering, from your perspective, from your research, what you make of that link between us boys not being allowed to cry all the way up to the symptoms that we have as men that lead us to, why we're in so much pain, why we have all that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you made it brilliantly, talking about that that early socialization, like, and how that continues throughout the course of our lives, and how that socialization continues to impact the ways we neglect our physical and emotional selves. I think about it specifically, like I think about Black men, and I think about the things that Black men experience in this country, whether it's police brutality or racism or transphobia, and the ways in which you experience all this distress, yet you've internalized this message that you can't cry, you can't communicate about it. And so when we look at depressive rates for Black men, for young Black men, when we look at self-harm rates, we wonder, like, where is that coming from? It's like the intersection of male socialization and this piece is literally killing us, right? And so it's pivotal. It's a critical health intervention for us to really expand the range of what it means to be a man, so that the range isn't so limited and so rigid, and so that men and masculine folks can have the full range of their humanity, which is a really big part of what happens, right? You lose your humanity because you become this kind of caricature person of a self, and you can't be a full human self. And so I think that, like, that's a critical health intervention. One of the things that we do at Beam, we have our program Black Masculinity Reimagined, right? And it's really built out of the work that I've seen most effective in really transforming men and masculine folks in these concepts. And so it does all the work of, like, one, beginning to just sit back and examine, what did I learn about what it means to be a man, whether I'm gay, straight, whether I'm non-binary, what did I learn about masculinity, whether I'm a woman, there are masculine women who are in the spaces, and begin to think about, what did I learn? Not necessarily what was just taught to me specifically, but what did I see modeled with dad or uncle or the caregivers who are masculine in my life? What did they show me through their behavior, and what did I internalize? And how is that showing up in ways that are not serving me, but actually creating harm and facilitating, like, challenges in my own life, right? So beginning that process of self-reflection and then building skills, because this is the critical piece. It takes skills to learn how to do differently.
Yep.
We talk all the time intellectually about, like, we can theorize about patriarchy, theorize about sexism, but if I don't have the skills and the tools to show up differently, if I don't have the reframing, the practices, then it all just is just intellectual exercise, right? And so you have to actually, and not only do you have to practice, and this is one thing I think is critical for Black Masculinity Reimagined and all programs working with Black men and boys, you got to get the practice, but you got to have a community to reinforce it with you. I got to have you and you and you, and, like, as my friends, as my homies, to be like, we're in this together, so we're teaching each other to hold each other to that. Because if you don't have a community, there's too many things out there that are going to tell you counter. It's going to give you a different message. But if I'm going through with a cohort of folks, which is what we generally do, like a cohort of 30 to 40 folks, build relationships, then you have somebody who's like, yeah, I know you want to say that to your girl, but you know that's not cool, right? So you have somebody reinforcing that with you. And that's what we need to build communities of accountability. Because as much as I hate to admit it, the insidiousness of misogyny and sexism is that men listen to other men.
Yeah.
And so when a man says that, like, hey, like, it's not cool that you show up like that, when a man intervenes in that, there's a response that sexism has taught many men to not listen to when it comes from a woman, right? And so it's so important that we not only unlearn, but we unlearn in community and build more communities and mentors to help show men and masculine folks who are younger that this is a different way to be, and consistently.
I love it. So tell me some ways that you practice healthy living, ways that, because we don't want to perpetuate a behavior that we oftentimes see. So you've done a lot of research and you care about this. So give me some ways that you are actively living.
Ooh, big question. Practicing healthy living. I think one of the biggest pieces in the context of this conversation, so two different pieces. So one, I'm just talking about my physical health. Like, one, I am intentional about listening to what my body is telling me. When I'm experiencing some kind of back pain, like I had actually a shoulder injury, like it was really interesting because I had to stop myself because I was ready to ignore it for like 2 days. I was like, wait, are you doing what you say you shouldn't do? And I had to go to the doctor.
He catches you, doesn't it?
So practicing listening to my body, listening to what my body's telling me. I have my therapy practice that I go to. I also have a variety of other wellness practices. I also, particularly as somebody who's been socialized as a man, regardless of how I identify, I'm a non-binary person who's been socialized as a man, making sure that in my relationships with women and feminine folks, that I'm listening more and not projecting as much and being intentional with that piece. Those are some of the ways I practice healthy living and continue to try to practice healthy living. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
You're an angel.
Yes. Yeah, I can feel
So
you over there, Liz,
wonderful.
just soaking it in and just loving
so
it.
great.
Soaking it in. We all
It's
are.
We
so
all are.
We so
healthy.
appreciate you.
Yeah.
And the good news is that you're not going anywhere. We have 3 more episodes
We
of this
do.
to do. Thank you so much for tuning into this special episode. Look out for the next one. We're going to go deeper and deeper and deeper. For more men's health information and resources, you can find us. Where can they find us, Liz?
At We Are Man Enough on Instagram or Healthline on Instagram.
Yes. See you soon. This is Man Enough.